What up? This is Dart Adams, and the last time I did one of these, it was episodes 1 through 5, so it ran long. I'm going to cover episodes 6 and 7 in this one and address some of the things that I said or I spoke on, and then also give context for those people who were not outside and alive and around for what was happening between the episodes that we covered in 6 and 7. So we're going from 1986, 87 into the early 90s, that Celtics team, then to the early 90s, mid 90s, the transfer of power to Rick Pitino in 97, which was hell, all the way into 2000, before 2001 when Paul Pierce was stabbed. So that's where that's where we're headed now. And in between, there's some heavy stuff where we deal with Reggie Lewis's career and then the death of Reggie Lewis. So we're gonna get into that right now. So, but again, Len Bias signs with the Boston Celtics after he gets drafted. The Celtics win the 1986 championship. He's going to fly into town, get met by Larry Bird. Larry Bird's going to take him. He's going to start working out. Casey Jones did not like playing rookies. And, that was well documented. He was going to change his tune for Len Bias. Len Bias was going to be in that rotation, that 7-8 man rotation. What happens is Len Bias dies. Len Bias is used as a vehicle for stiffer drug laws and also DARE, D-A-R-E. The anti-drug campaign kicks into overdrive. There's a war on drugs. It gets even more steam. People getting more years for selling crack and cocaine. People going away, going to jail, doing what we call football numbers. So the war on drugs was an attack on pretty much the inner city in Black America, as if, the Reaganomic era didn't already take money away, and already, push us to the margins. It was just bad after bad. But I said he wasn't even a person anymore. He became a device through which to pass laws. He became a cautionary tale. They completely lost sight of Len Bias being an actual human being. They did. He was just a device. He was a phrase that you used. You don't want to be like Len Bias, don't end up like Len Bias. So that's what I was talking about. Anyways, after Len Bias' passing, the immediate thing that happens is the Boston Celtics, there's a domino effect. First thing that happens is we have Bill Walton. He has a stress fracture in his foot, which means everybody else has to play more, which results in the injury to Kevin McHale. Kevin McHale injures his foot. He keeps playing on it. Never gets better, but he keeps playing on it. An 82-game season. He keeps playing on it. Who's his backup? Google. He keeps playing on it. You have an 82-game season. You're coming off of an 82-game season, and then you played in the playoffs. You played deep in the playoffs almost every year of your NBA career. That's another season added on to the seasons you've already played. This is what people forget. And you're playing in an era where if you got hurt, you still played. And there's no one on the bench to spell you because you were the dude that came off the bench. You were so good that the person that that was in front of you, they shipped them out of town. So now you're the guy, and there's nobody to come off the bench to put in for you. What Len Bias was going to do was he was going to be the guy seventh and then step into the six-man role after the injury to Bill Walton. But he also could have spelled, due to his size and his versatility, he could have spelled Kevin McHale at power forward and Larry Bird at small forward. He didn't get that opportunity. He wasn't alive. So the Celtics end up playing and playing and played a lot of minutes. Because again, Casey Jones does not have a deep bench. And Casey Jones didn't trust the young players. So these guys are playing, think, New York Knicks minutes every night after already playing a lot of minutes. So they get injured. Kevin McHale gets progressively more injured. Larry Bird is progressively more hurt. They don't talk about it, but I believe Dennis Johnson actually had a fracture in his wrist during this stretch too. And, these guys are run down. They get to the playoffs, they hobble through the playoffs, they get to the NBA Finals, and they just don't have any more gas in the tank. Plus, they're kind of old. And they lose, even though they are hobbled, they are injured, they are tired. They still play a 6-game series with the Los Angeles Lakers. I believe that had Len Bias lived, the Celtics win that series, the Celtics win that NBA championship, and they go back-to-back. Now, if the Boston Celtics win back-to-back championships, instead of picking 22nd in the NBA draft like they did in this actual timeline, because they were the runner-up, they lost, they were the Eastern Conference champions, and they were the runner-up, they would have picked 23rd. Now, regardless if they picked 22nd or 23rd, in 1987, they're still picking Reggie Lewis in the 1987 NBA draft. Why are they picking Reggie Lewis in the 1987 NBA draft? Because Reggie Lewis, they got to see him every day. He was in their backyard. They knew him. They were familiar with him. He worked at the Celtics camps. They had people watching his games anyway. They were already attuned to what he was doing, his unique skill set, his talents, the kind of person he was. Everybody was in love with that guy. So they were going to pick him 22nd or 23rd in the 1987 NBA draft. And quite frankly, the reason why they were going to pick him in the 1987 NBA draft is crazy. There's a pre-draft camp called the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament that happens in Portsmouth, Virginia. In 1987, Reggie was injured, so he didn't go. Instead, I believe they sent his teammate, the point guard from Northeastern, Andre Lafleur. Now, at this Portsmouth Invitational Tournament, 1987, there were a couple of breakout stars. One of them being a guy named Muggsy Bogues, who actually played with Reggie. Another guy being, I don't know if you heard of him, Scottie Pippen from Central Arkansas. Scottie Pippen had such a great Portsmouth Invitational Tournament that his stock jumped so high that he ended up getting picked by the Chicago Bulls. I believe that had Reggie Lewis played at the Portsmouth Invitational Tournament, there's no way he's there for the Celtics at 22 and 23. No chance in hell. So the Celtics would have picked Reggie Lewis. Reggie, again, didn't play a lot that first year. He played 49 games, but he had flashes of brilliant, scored 4.5 points a game because Casey Jones just didn't believe in playing rookies. This would have changed if he had Len Bias. If Len Bias was around and Reggie Lewis came along and they would have picked Reggie Lewis, they would have had these two guys playing, I believe. They would have seen the light. There's no way that you have those two guys playing, busting people's ass at Hellenic College, and in practices and saying, no, we're not going to play you guys. There's no chance in hell. All right? Now, another thing that I talked about with what Len Bias would have done, he would change the perception of the Celtics for black folks in America. He would have been jumping, he would have been running, he would have been dunking, he would have been rocking the Reeboks, he would have been cool, he would have been appealing. Len Bias was the one dude in the ACC during that era that people thought was as good as, if not better than, Michael Jordan. And people thought he was cool as, or as, flashy as, or as dynamic as Michael Jordan. So Reebok could have changed the sneaker game, could have changed the perception of the Celtics, everything. And if you have Len Bias and Reggie Lewis, this is what changes. You have the Pistons on the rise. Okay? You have the Chicago Bulls on the rise because now they have Jordan and Pippen. Not only that, but you also have the LA Lakers. Somebody's not winning chips. Somebody's not getting past somebody. If you have Len Bias and Reggie Lewis playing with the big three. Okay? That would change the entire trajectory of NBA history. Had Len Bias and Reggie Lewis played together from the 87-88 season until the 1992-1993 season. That's the point I'm making. So anyway, Larry gets injured, I believe double surgery on both Achilles, shin splints, stuff like that, bone spurs, all type of things. And in his second year, Reggie Lewis starts playing. He averages 18.5 points overall, but 21.6 points in 57 starts. And he is a shining light. He's a shining light. He is a revelation. The things he's doing on the court. I wrote an entire piece about Reggie Lewis called Reggie's Last Game. That people, it's funny. I feel like it's on my Medium. The only people that read it were people that produce docuseries about basketball. Those are the only people that ever bring it up to me. It's like, yeah, so I was looking for something. Listen, I read your piece, Reggie's Last Game. Or I read your piece about, how Reggie Lewis and Len Bias would have changed the NBA forever. I'm like, the only people that read that are people who work in basketball or make documentaries. That's interesting. But hey, it found the audience is supposed to. Some people want everybody reading their stuff. I apparently write stuff, very specific things for specific people who bring me in on projects and documentaries and books. Hey, works for me. I love that that's the tagline for Hunter, and I'm so old that everybody doesn't know that. So, anyways, back to what happens after the 1987 finals. So, right there, you have this thing that happens where after the Pistons lose in the Eastern Conference Finals, there's an incident with Isaiah Thomas and Dennis Rodman saying, if Larry Bird was black, he'd just be another good guy. Now, back in those days, people were not sophisticated enough or honest enough to have the very real dialogue about this statement or what it meant. Larry Bird, even when you watch his docuseries, they'll talk to people and they're like, yeah, we're going to win. We got Larry Bird. Like, all the trust is in Larry. Like, not the Celtics, not the team, not the unit. We have Larry Bird. The one time I kind of felt that and I saw it happen and I was like, oh, there's no way that team's going to beat that team because they have that player. I'm going to keep it a buck with you. UConn, Diana Taurasi. And they used to say it. There was no way we're going to lose. We got D. And I was like, ain't no way they're going to lose. They got D. Like, you got Diana Taurasi, it's a wrap. Or you have Stewie, it's a wrap. I have never looked at the Boston Celtics and thought to myself, the Celtics are going to win because of Larry Bird. I thought the Celtics are going to win because they're the Celtics. Celtics will win because of all the players they have, because of how they play like a team, because of their depth, because of this and this, even though back then they didn't really have depth. Let's keep that a buck. These teams didn't have depth. KC wasn't playing anybody. You're not bringing Connor Henry off the bench. We're not worried about David Third Kill. Nobody's looking for Greg Kite to give us good minutes. No one's thinking about Brad Lowhouse or Fred, what was his name? Fred Roberts. Nobody was worried about Fred Roberts and Brad Lowhouse coming off the bench, Back in the days, you had Seasting. Back in the days, you had Wedman. You had all these other people that you're like, all right, I have some trust in you. I think Greg Kite can play some minutes and just get some fouls because he couldn't shoot free throws. He couldn't shoot. He couldn't do anything. He could just rebound and be a warm body. Now, after the second season that Reggie had, The Celtics, I believe, they go 42-20, get swept in the first round by the Pistons. But Reggie has an amazing playoffs. Next season, Larry's back and Reggie's back, but Reggie's in like a third guy role because it's Larry, Kevin, Reggie. But Reggie's our guy. Because again, need to keep this in mind. Reggie Lewis, I said he arrived on campus in Northeastern in 1983. First season was 1983-84 season. I said I was 7 going on 8. I turned 8 that summer. So when he's on campus, I'm 8. And that first season he played, I'm 8. But Reggie Lewis is in Boston from me just turning 8 all the way until he dies weeks before my 18th birthday. So we were fans of Reggie Lewis for almost a full decade. And he lived, right now I'm in the South End, Lower Roxbury. Reggie Lewis lived on Northeastern's campus, which is down the street from where I am. Okay? I was talking to Peter Edward when we were doing the campaign from here to from Roxbury to the world for RCC, Roxbury Community College, and the Reggie Lewis Center, which is celebrating its 30th anniversary. And I was talking about how I used to see Reggie Lewis all the time. Down the street from me used to be a place called Braddock Drug. My mom worked there until it was finished in 2000, and it had been there since 1933, I think. It was a landmark. And Reggie used to go to Braddock Drug, but Reggie used to also go to this place. I believe it was a store called Rick's on the corner of Mass Ave, right above Symphony Station. There were all these stores all along Huntington Ave. Back in the days along Huntington Ave, it doesn't exist anymore. There used to be basketball courts along Huntington Ave. Northeastern has built so much along Huntington Ave that it's impossible to even, I feel, for most people to imagine what it was like back in the days. But we see Reggie all the time. He used to still wearing his Dunbar Poets jacket back in the 83, 84, 85, 86. And he was like a superstar because he was covered in the Boston Globe like a superstar. Jackie McMullen covered him and wrote about him like he was already a Boston Celtic. And Reggie was our guy. The kids grew up idolizing Reggie. So I remember when Reggie Lewis's first basketball card came out, everybody had the same way growing up, the guy was Jim Rice. Reggie Lewis was the guy. We related to Reggie. Now, those Celtics, Casey Jones is I'm out, I'm done. So then, you get the Chris Ford era, the Jimmy Rogers era of Boston Celtics basketball. And they're we got to start playing these young guys. We start drafting these young guys. We got to start playing these young guys. So what happens is we get Brian Shaw. This is when we get D. Brown. This is when we bring in Kevin Gamble. This is when we have Sherman Douglas. We trade for Sherman Douglas. This is when we have John Bagley come back. And the Celtics all of a sudden go from being, get the ball in the post to the slow dudes, and then you have, the big three, dominating in the paint. And our fast breaks weren't really fast. Now, the Boston Celtics fast breaks were fast as hell. It was to the point where they highlighted it. Tommy Heinsohn would call them the zips. We got 4 zips in the zap. So you have Robert Parrish in the center, and you would have, let's say you have Rick Fox. Let's say you have D. Brown, Kevin Gamble, Reggie Lewis, Brian Shaw. 4 zips, 1 zap. Or let's say you have Rick Fox, D. Brown, Brian Shaw, Reggie Lewis, Kevin McHale. 4 zips, 1 zap. Right? So, and then it's there was called triple threat, the Zip Boys. And the Celtics were now they're throwing alley-oops to D. Brown. D. Brown's blocking shots. Brian Shaw's crossing people over and dunking on them. They're throwing alley-oops to Reggie Lewis. The crowd's going crazy. And now it's like, oh, this is what the Celtics look like now. The thing is that even though the Celtics brand of basketball, the players on the team had changed. The look of the team has changed. And this is also like by the time, this is when they didn't talk about this at all. There's no more Dennis Johnson. So the point guard duties have been split between Sherman Douglas and John Bagley. And they just run. They didn't discuss this at all. And so now the Celtics brand of basketball is really exciting. It's young. And Reggie Lewis's game, again, I wrote a piece called Reggie's Last Game. Reggie Lewis had a very unique game. He's long, he's rangy, but the thing about Reggie Lewis is that he's wiry, but he's strong. Reggie Lewis would drive into your body, contact with you, stay in the air, and score through you. Or he'd be running at you full speed, you're retreating, he stops on a dime, does a pull-up jumper right in your face. Okay, so I can't do that. So I'm gonna crowd him. Reggie goes around you and dunks on you. All right, I'm gonna give him space. Cool. Reggie's gonna drive, stop in the middle of the lane, do a leaning floater. I can't block that. I don't know when the release is. Oh, and Reggie Lewis's jumper, he leaned back like that song by Terror Squad. He shot a lean back jumper, and you couldn't tell where the height was because he was so tall, his arms were so long and lanky, and he shot like this, and he would just let it go. Robert Parrish has something we call the rainbow jumper. So even if he didn't jump or he just shot it, he was already 7 feet and 1/2 inch. And he had long arms. So he would shoot it and it would go like, how you block that? You can't block it. And Reggie had a shot you could block. But here's the thing about Reggie. Reggie could block your shot. Reggie was one of the best shot blocking guards. He was one of the best rebounding guards, one of the best offensive rebounding guards. Not only could he pull up and shoot in your face, but he could drive. He was amazing at driving. He had all these different angles. Oh, he had a back to the basket game. He had a post game. He had a turnaround jumper from both low blocks. He had a fadeaway jumper leaning back. He had a pull-up jumper leaning in. He had floaters. He would cross you over. He'd dunk. And again, if you try to stop him at the rim, he's bouncing off you and going through you, even though he's only 6'7", like 195, 205, 215, whatever. He was strong. He gave Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen fits. Michael Jordan used to switch Scottie Pippen off on him. He'd dunk on Scottie, and then now Mike got to pick him up. If Reggie Lewis gave Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen fits, imagine what Len Bias and Reggie Lewis would have done to the entire league. When you see what this man did in his second year in the NBA playing against the Pistons in that playoff series, you're like, oh, his ceiling was high. Everybody respected him. Everybody loved him in Boston. I'm talking about at the height of the gang culture, at the height of the crack era. When kids are given Area D, Area E police no respect, swearing at them after the Charles Stewart case and everything like that. Like, get out my face, all these DTs and detectives, man, 5-0, all this other stuff. If Reggie Lewis came around, the kids wouldn't swear. They respected Reggie Lewis so much that they would change their language. Because that's not what Reggie's energy was. You find another person like that, there isn't. Everybody in the inner city in Boston felt like Reggie was ours. He belonged to us. He had his reverse jam, Reeboks. You know, NBA Entertainment didn't even have the opportunity to really make the superstar push for him. Right? Larry Bird retires. Now, in the Boston Celtics, they have like this next man up, and also they pass down the traditions, pass the torch. So there was this thing of the little brother. Danny Ainge considered Larry Bird and Kevin McHale and Chief his big brothers. So when Reggie came along, it was the same thing. Brian Shaw, you know, Reggie Lewis, D. Brown, Rick Fox, Sherman Douglas, all these people considered the big three their big brothers. And when Larry Bird retired, it was finally time for Reggie to get out from under his big brother's shadow. And he was going to lead the team in the 1992-1993 season as their captain, as the face of the franchise. And he's the guy on the cover of the media guide. He's our guy. Every little kid wants the Reggie Lewis jersey. Every kid wants the Reggie Lewis basketball card. You go to BNBL games, and I remember going to a BNBL game. This is very true. It happened after the Celtics had played a game. Go out to a BNBL court right there in the South End. The first 3 possessions, kids are bricking shots. The ref stops them, says, "Stop trying to shoot like Reggie Lewis and be yourselves." All right. And then the game starts, and now kids are making their shots because everybody's trying to be like Reggie. Now, 92, 93, one of the big concerns was that Reggie Lewis was not a vocal leader. He wasn't out there calling out his teammates like Larry did. So the season starts, the Celtics start off on a losing streak. They right the ship a little bit, but by the All-Star break, I believe they're 12-17. And they had just brought in Xavier McDaniel as a free agent. So you have Xavier McDaniel, you have Joe Klein, you have Ed Pinkney, I believe you have Sherman Douglas. I don't know if John Bagley's still there, but you have Kevin Gamble, you have Rick Fox, you have D. Brown. Yeah. So that's the team. Oh, Ala Abdelnaby. You have Ala Abdelnaby, who they got from Portland. So he starts, but he doesn't finish the games. He plays like less than 20 minutes a game, plays like 18 minutes a game. Right? So, overwhelmingly black squad. And there's Kevin McHale, of course, and Robert Parrish. So, it's New Year's. Right before New Year's. They lose a game to the LA Clippers in LA. And then they fly back to Boston. And Reggie has a meeting. He tells everybody, look, clean slate. We're not 12-17. We're going to be 0-0. Our next game we play against the LA Clippers. We get to start a whole new season. And from now on, 1993 on, this is what we'll be judged by. This is who we're going to be. And the Celtics go 36-17 over the last 53 games of the season. Win streak, a losing streak, win streak. They have one of the best games of the year. Reggie is phenomenal. One of the best games of the year on national television, and they barely lose. And they barely lose to the Phoenix Suns, who are led by Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley has one of his all-time great games to beat the Celtics. Everybody saw this game. And they're like, damn, Reggie Lewis is serious. Now, since the Celtics were hovering around 500 during the All-Star break, they didn't vote him in as an All-Star that year. He was like, that's fine, because I'm trying to do something special. I'm trying to win a chip. The Celtics are quite literally if not the hottest, the second hottest team in the NBA by the time the playoffs start in 93. They start the playoffs against the Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets, they have Larry Johnson, they have Alonzo Mourning, they have Kendall Gill. The story was that Reggie Lewis didn't play well against Kendall Gill. That's what the media was spinning. Pissed Reggie off. Reggie was like, I'm going to destroy this man and let everybody know that Kendall Gill can't guard me. I don't even know where this narrative came from. So Reggie Lewis comes out the gate, hell-bent on destroying Kendall Gill, going at Kendall Gill. He's going at Alonzo Mourning if he tries to cover for Kendall Gill. And I think he hits like 7 of his first 11 or something like that. Scores like 11 points out the gate or something, and then he collapses. This has all been covered in the piece, but he collapses. But the thing is that that's why Reggie was hell-bent. And also, he knew that Larry was in the crowd. And he was like, this is my team. This is the Reggie Lewis era. I'm going to lead this team. And this is where I make that statement. Now, Reggie dies. He doesn't play the rest of the series. The Celtics lose the series. And Reggie dies. Now, that same summer, that same stretch, Drazen Petrovic also dies. Drazen was the new young star of the New Jersey Nets. Reggie Lewis dies. He's the new young star, superstar of the Boston Celtics. This is before NBA Entertainment really had the opportunity to really push these guys to the rest of the league like that, make them real, legitimate superstars. This is before everybody had cable. NBA Entertainment was just now putting out these VHS tapes. They just had inside stuff. This is the year that they went out and went to MCA Records. It was like, we're gonna put out a soundtrack, and try to appeal to young people with like hip hop and R&B. So Boston was very instrumental in this. You had the B Brown Posse had a basketball theme single, Drop It on the One, and Belle Biv DeVoe had Above the Rim, which was playing during this episode, during this stretch where they're talking about the Celtics and how it explains, how everything's changing. It's a very different era here. You have licensed video games for the NBA coming out of the Lakers versus Celtics in the NBA playoffs, and then EA starts making, the Showdown series and all these other like NBA games. And the NES starts putting out NBA games, just Tecmo NBA basketball. But these games are using the 91-92 season. So they don't have updated new NBA games every year like live yet. They're like a year behind. Like think about like how Tecmo Bowl was years behind in the roster when it came out. Like these dudes don't even play on this team anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like y'all don't even have like the license of the players union. So this happens after Reggie dies. It just gets worse, right? Because after that, Kevin McHale retires. The next season is just sad. After that season, Robert Parrish leaves. He leaves the Celtics and he joins the Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets, the team that eliminated them in '93. So he's a backup to Alonzo Mourning. And then I said, and the bottom fell out. Because what then happens is the 1995 season, the 94-95 season, they sign, and they did not talk about this at all. They signed Dominique Wilkins. Dominique Wilkins had a fantastic season the year before with the LA Clippers. And they think he has so much in the tank. He has a regression. He was scoring like 25 with the Clippers. He scored like 18 a game with the Celtics. He's missing dunks. He's just not who he used to be. His regression started immediately. Like he had like a very lackluster season with the Boston Celtics. These are the days of the East Bay catalog. I had an East Bay catalog. I bought a number 12 Dominique Wilkins jersey. I had a Wilkins jersey. My jerseys I got at the East Bay catalog, I believe I had a Jamal Mashburn, I had a 32 Jamal Mashburn. I had a 45 for when Michael Jordan came back. I had a 2 Larry Johnson jersey, which was crazy because the gang in my neighborhood was the South End Hornets, and I didn't really wear it out that much because I didn't want people thinking I was part of the gang, even though my cousins I think were in the gang. I got I went to Denver for the mock trial championships in Denver. I went to the Denver locker room, the Nuggets locker room. I believe that's what the store was called. It was right by the hotel, and I bought a Jalen Rose 5. I had that. So when I went to Morgan State '96, these are the jerseys I had. And people would call me Celtic on campus because I was the only person on campus who had a Dominique Wilkins 12 jersey. But that year, they go to the playoffs. They're the 8th seed. They lose in the first round to the Orlando Magic in a 3-1 series because it was a weird matchup for Orlando. When you look at the games, you're like, they lost one game, I believe, by 47. I missed the entire series because I was in an exchange program at Vermont Academy. Thank God. But the thing is that it was the last series, Celtics series played in Boston Garden before they demolished it. And then the Celtics were just trash. The Celtics were so bad in 96, 97. The Celtics were so bad. There was a stretch. ML Carr took over the team. He signed Dana Barrows, gave him a gang of money. They drafted Antoine Walker. I said you have Antoine Walker playing all 5 positions. ML Carr wanted to showcase Antoine Walker, have him play all 5 positions, and try to get him Rookie of the Year. One time, ML Carr said that he'll trade draft picks to the Bulls for the opportunity to go to Birmingham, Alabama, I believe, to try to recruit Michael Jordan to come back to the NBA and play for the Celtics because we're both from North Carolina. And we're like, huh? What? And then it was just like, all right. When Tim Duncan shows up at Wake Forest, Tim Duncan, Lauren Woods, still some other guys. At one point, it was Randolph Childress, and he goes to the NBA at Wake Forest. And he's like, yo, everybody wants Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan's the guy. We're going to tank for Tim. So 97 is all about tanking for Tim. And people are sending death threats. People are talking about what's wrong with ML Carr. This is dumb. These lineups are stupid. These players can't play. The Celtics lost so many games and won so few that during those seasons, back-to-back seasons, they used to have in the summer this thing called Rick and Purvis's Excellent Games. They used to show on Sports Channel. The games that the Celtics won, they were replay with commentary from Rick Fox and Purvis Ellison. And sometimes a special guest would stop by. Like it would probably be like, I don't know, David Wesley or D. Brown or, like some of the other guys on the Celtics, And like they would come by and they would comment on things. They would stop the game. They would pause. They would interject what happened behind the scenes because the Celtics won so little. There was a late night talk show. I believe they drafted Eric Williams along this time too. There was a late night talk show that they gave Tommy Heinsohn. Tommy Heinsohn had a late night talk show because they had to fill in time. They had to do all these things because people were not just watching for the games. You had some of the worst players on the teams at that time. You would get Frank Bukowski. I believe Alton Lister came in. They had Dwayne Schnitzius was a Celtic at one point. Like they were horrible. They were horrible. Anyway. We get to 1997, and ML Carr hands the keys over to Rick Pitino. Rick Pitino was an all-time great coach, right? He won national championships. He turned around many a team and stuff like that. Here's the problem, right? And also, if you want to get back to the issue that happened with Larry Bird and the issue that happened at Larry Bird and Isaiah Thomas and all the other stuff, right? When you think about how Larry Bird was marketed in the league and pushed in the league, it was very clear that, people looked at Larry and they saw him as a hope, or they saw something in him, they identified with him. I think it's a very similar thing to Luka Doncic. there are these people that have this belief in Luka Doncic, like, and I'm like, is this the same guy that I saw the Celtics attack? And he pretty much gave them the chip. And when he went to LA, he's the number one selling jersey in the NBA now. Luka Doncic. I think Luka is a generational talent. But there are plenty of generational talents that didn't win championships. Allen Iverson, generational talent. Everybody loved him. The way he played, he was ball dominant. He did not lend to winning a championship. Carmelo Anthony, all-time great player, great scorer. The way he played, the man couldn't even go to the bench to help his team. And ultimately, it didn't lend in him winning a chip. I think about somebody like Ron Harper. Ron Harper was all-world. He could do everything. Ron Harper was so amazing on offense, and he was so talented that he was the guy that made Dr. J realize, I'm going to have to hang up these high tops one day. Dr. J. All right? Ron Harper gets injured. Ron Harper wants to stay in the league. Ron Harper realizes that I don't need to be high-flying. I don't need to be the dude dunking. I don't need to have the ball in my hands all the time. I could play defense. I could pass the ball. I could communicate out there on the court. And he extends his career, and he wins several championships. He's glue in several championship teams. Or he could have just said, I'm not the man anymore. I'm going to retire. Because if I can't be the guy scoring 25, then what's the point in playing? That's not basketball. That's not how you win. So anyway, right? It turns out the Rick Pitino era was only slightly better than the ML Carr era. Rick Pitino, he had Summer League. He brings in my dude, Wayne Turner, who played for him in Kentucky. And then I think the last year he played with Tubby Smith. So Wayne Turner, he doesn't draft Wayne Turner. He tells Wayne Turner he's going to draft Chris Clack. He's like, okay. He brings him into training camp. There's a dude, A.C. Earl, who the Celtics drafted thinking he was going to be out of Iowa, who the Celtics thought who was going to develop. He didn't. He was big, clumsy. He was an oaf. Google oaf, O-A-F. And it was like, you drafted that guy? What the hell made you think that he was going to be good? Anyway, A.C. Earl was in training camp, and Rick Pitino was heaping praise upon him, talking about how great he looks and all this other stuff. And then next thing you know, he's gone. Rick Pitino hated that guy. He was trying to get him out of there. Rick Pitino says to the Celtics, he says to Greg Minor, I want you out of here. He says to this guy, I want you out of here. D. Brown, I want you out of here. He's just cleaning house. He doesn't want anybody who reminds him of the old Celtics. He doesn't even want Red Owl back around. Takes away his president title, which is fucking nuts. And then he tries to install all these things that Pat Riley does in Boston. Pat Riley in Boston? Fuck out of here. So, what ends up happening is he drafts, because ultimately what Rick Fox wanted to do is he wanted to draft Tim Duncan and he wanted to draft Keith Van Horn. He sends ML Carr to the draft lottery. The Celtics get picks 3 and 6. So now Rick's like, fuck. So what does Rick do? He drafts the backcourt of the future. He drafts Chauncey Billups, we didn't like, and Ron Mercer, a shooting guard who didn't play defense and couldn't shoot. Why would you draft a shooting guard in a team where you want him to shoot threes who can't shoot threes? Or why would you make your NBA team press NBA guards? You're going to press Tim Hardaway? You're going to press Jason Kidd? You're going to press Muggsy Bogues? You're going to press Steve Smith? You're going to press Terrell Brandon? I'm just going to say names. You're going to press Kevin Johnson? You're a dumbass. He tried to turn Travis Knight into a three-point shooter. Travis Knight. He tried to make him the starting center of the Boston Celtics. Travis Knight. Travis Knight got replaced by Andrew DeClerc, and he wasn't shooting threes anymore. The Celtics weren't pressing anymore after a while either. The Celtics end up drafting, he ends up falling into their lap. My dude, Paul Pierce, Headband P. Paul Pierce was a revelation for the Boston Celtics. They had Antoine Walker, who was a superstar coming out the gate, employee number 8, had his own Adidas sneaker, was on the cover of NBA Live 99, was this personality. But as we're playing, Antoine Walker realizes that Paul's different. Paul's a beast. And then he realizes that I always get the ball, I'm the guy, but here's something. Paul Pierce, there are spots on the court where he can get to and nobody can stop him. So he starts working with Paul on getting to his spots, finding where the sweet spots are. He starts talking to Paul about, where does he want the ball? How does he want it? When does he want to drive? You could go past this guy. You could do this. If you pull up here, nobody's going to stop you. When you get to the middle of the court, you can do X, Y, and Z. And then Antoine fills in from there. So they become one of the deadliest, duos in the NBA. But then we get to a point where Paul Pierce starts having his breakout parties. Now, here's the thing, too, about Paul Pierce I need to explain to everybody. The Celtics were terrible during this era. And back in this time, the NBA package with, networks, TBS, TNT, I believe it was still NBA on NBC at the time, was a little different. So if you were in a good team, you had, I think, 2 or 3 games you were guaranteed on national television. That was it. The minimum, if you weren't good. But other teams that had superstars, that had talent and stuff like that, they had, in the teens. And here's the thing. When you started getting good, they started adding you to national packages and dropping other teams. For the first 2.5 years of Paul Pierce's career in Boston, if you weren't in Boston, if you weren't in New England, if you weren't in Massachusetts, you did not see Paul Pierce's evolution. You didn't. You did not know how good Paul Pierce was. You did not really know how good Antoine Walker was, which, wow, he's on the cover of Live 99, and I'm like, these folks barely get to see him play. So Chauncey Billups traded 51 games to his career. I believe Ron Mercer got traded 131 games into his career. There was all this turmoil when Ron Mercer's agent, he was represented by, I believe, No Limit Sports, and an agent, someone correct me, named Tevester. And he used to harass Rick Pitino so much because he was so unprofessional, and Rick Pitino was a dickhead anyway, that Rick Pitino barred Ron Mercer's agent from being at any Boston Celtics practice facility or practice. And I was like, this is unprecedented. The Celtics were a shit show. They were a joke. They were a joke. They trade D. Brown and Chauncey Billups to Toronto because they had, I believe, they had Kenny Anderson, who was traded to Toronto but didn't want to report to Toronto, so they had his rights. So they traded for Kenny Anderson. Kenny Anderson comes to Boston. He's the Celtics point guard. And they waste him for years because Rick Pitino's in charge. And Paul Pierce gets stabbed September 2000, comes back, plays all 82 games, has a huge game, first game of the season and a win, and everybody's just in shock, because he should have died. Paul Pierce gets the nickname The Truth from a game they played against the Lakers, which I don't even think everybody saw. And episodes 8 and 9 are going to be Ubuntu, and These Are the Celtics, I believe. And I'm actually in the promo reel for episode 8 Ubuntu. I'm like, the Celtics were a joke. So anyway, I can't believe this one was longer than the one where I did 1 through 5. Jesus Christ. Well, either way, dead dogs is a saying in Boston on dead dogs. Like, it means seriously, like on my mother, on my son. It was this, but on dead dogs, as in your dogs, your people you ran with, your people in the streets, the people that passed away, you know, in the city, you know, going through it. Because again, came up through, you know, hard times, the crack era, the 80s, the Reaganomic 80s, you know, all that other stuff. So, you know, and then, you know, these streets are what they are. Eminem said the mean streets of Boston. I run like he was making fun of it, but these are the mean streets of Boston. You don't live it, we do. So anyway, that's wrapping up episode 6 and 7. I'm sorry that this ran so long. Actually, I'm not. I got out what I needed to. Last one's going to be covering episodes 8 and 9, and the Celtics play the Orlando Magic. Let's get revenge for 30 years ago. 1.